It is my pleasure to introduce our next session. The title of this session is Teaching Queer, Reaffirming Identities by Sharing Your Own. And it is a pleasure to welcome Sonja Benton. Sonja identifies as an intersex, queer, genderqueer, disabled, Latinx educator. They've done extensive research on teaching with these identities and affirming students with marginalized identities. As well as an educator, Sonja works as a healthcare allies trainer, a safe zone trainer, an intersex guest speaker for WWAMI, which is a partnership with the University of Washington School of Medicine, and continues to make activism of all styles a priority. Sonja's research has previously focused on activism techniques, the power of personal story, teaching queer, and a variety of intersectional media representations. And you can read more about Sonja on the website. Sonja, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everybody. Some of y'all I know, so it's awesome to have friends in the crowd always. I'm going to kind of start off a little bit slow just to get us started. As you already heard, but I can't not introduce myself too. My name's Sonja. I use they, them pronouns. You can call me Sonja. And I'm really excited to start. I'm dropping a link in the chat, which is just for a quick Google poll. That is just so then I can see kind of who's here and where we're coming from and what's up. If there's multiple people listening in from one Zoom account, you can combine stuff. It allows you to just hit a checklist where you can select as many things as you like. I am going to start sharing my screen just so then you guys have some pretty pictures to look at while I talk, if you would not like to fill out that Google form. I'm just sharing this so then we have some pictures. These are some really, really great photos of me looking fairly uncomfortable in a variety of different settings. Some of these are at awards. The lavender celebration are the ones with those purple cords there. You can see professors that I had awarding me with those, which is a pretty cool thing. You can see my thesis defense, which has other professors there where I'm wearing a lot of rainbow stuff. I also kind of don't remember any of it, which I've heard is normal. And then also a picture of me at a protest. So we're getting some sense of maybe some of that background, some kind of key moments that brought me to where we're at with this talk. So while I kind of wait for those Google form things to fill in and while we kind of look at the pictures as we want, I'm going to chat a little bit about why I'm here. So I identify as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, in case that wasn't clear in Paul's intro. Queer, genderqueer, and intersex. I've identified as many other things in the past too, because I am one of the people that really grew with the internet's increase of terminology, which is wonderful. I initially came out when I was 15, which is long before I had any idea what I was doing with my life. And I've been openly out ever since. This is important because it means that I was publicly out long before I had any job, besides like babysitting and under the table stuff. And long before I was a teacher or a student as an adult, right? More importantly, starting in high school, I was very publicly involved in activism, both related to the LGBTQ plus community and for other causes. This is relevant because I didn't necessarily have the luxury of hiding how I identified or what I cared about from employers, coworkers, classmates, etc., which isn't necessarily the normal experience that people have in this community. Especially right before I started teaching, I was filled with anxiety about how other people would react to that information. There wasn't really any hiding it, not in the internet era, not with social media, right? I had appeared on like Fox News Montana, like this was just a thing that was true. And so I had to find a way to kind of grapple with that. And especially teaching in a place like Bozeman, Montana, which hadn't always been and wasn't still always that welcoming to LGBTQ plus people, I had to learn very quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that share just for a second, so then I can take a look at what our responses are. Okay, so I'm seeing that we are mostly members of the LGBTQ plus communities, and we also have some allies, which is excellent. I'm seeing that some of us are college students, some of us are educators, some of us are healthcare workers. Awesome. So those are things that I have experience in being, which is always good. So I'm going to go ahead and pop us back into that shared screen right now. But please stop me at any point if you have questions. I can actually see chat when I'm presenting. So we can definitely pause at any moment that you want. All right. So I'm going to move on. We can come back to these later if you have questions about them. So because I am an introvert and because I generally find a lot of comfort in just knowing things overall, I spent the summer, specifically before I started teaching, reading about strategies. There were not many, right? Most of the progressive teaching books that I had access to at the time, and even still, don't really grapple with identity in some pretty important ways, because most of them aren't written by people that hold marginalized identities. So I had to find a different source. And that different source ended up being authors that I already loved and already knew well. Some of those are pictured here. Audre Lorde, Gloria Anzaldúa, and Bell Hooks, who are all well known for being amazing human beings, as well as wonderful teachers and professors and writers, theorists, and more. Obviously, there are a lot more. But these three authors, particularly the books pictured on the slide, really became the basis of how I would handle being out publicly in classrooms, work environments, and organizations of every kind. And this idea comes from the idea that sort of weaves through their work, which is radical vulnerability. And for some quick kind of basis on these authors if we don't know them, Audre Lorde and Gloria Anzaldúa both identify as queer women of color. Gloria Anzaldúa is Latinx. She would describe herself as Chicanx most likely, and Audre Lorde was a Black woman. They both also grappled with illness throughout their lives, and we would now consider them to be disabled. Bell Hooks has identified as both a close ally and a part of the LGBTQ plus community, which has shifted over time, and also is an amazing Black woman writer that I recommend. So that's some background. That's all of the academia that I'll push on all y'all today. So we are going to sort of move on. So back to this idea of radical vulnerability. The best condensed definition I have is actually from Audre Lorde. It comes from an interview that she did with fellow author, teacher, and activist Adrienne Rich, who was a lesbian Jewish woman. I knew, as I had always known, that the only way you can head people off from using who you are against you is to be open and honest first, to talk about yourself first, to talk about yourself before they talk about you. It wasn't even courage. Speaking up was a protective mechanism for myself. This one part of this one interview, which is very long, really was that linchpin, right? That if people are going to know, the best way I can harness that knowledge is by being the one that gets to tell it, right? If all of my coworkers or students or whomever are coming into the room already knowing things about me, the best thing to do is to just immediately talk about it myself. So this means that I have to openly talk about myself, even in situations where that isn't exactly comfortable. It's really hard, right? And why would it even help? So this is the part where I really want y'all to engage as much as you can. And I want us to take a second to reflect. on these 3 questions. Did I see people that look like or identify like me in media that I was exposed to? That can be books, movies, TV, video games, whatever. Do I now? Did I pick a field to go into where I could see others like me in it? Did I make any large decisions, where to live, go to school, or what activities to get involved in because I saw others like me there? So take a few seconds to answer these questions for yourself. You're welcome to answer them in chat or aloud if you would like at any point. And I'll give you some time. Just so everybody knows, a reminder that everything that you put in chat will be recorded and able to be seen. So make sure that you're being thoughtful about that. And also, I am going to read aloud what you say in the chat. So make sure that you're comfortable with that. And if not, that is totally okay. All right, so hearing from Danny, for me, I think I saw myself some in media as a child, but I don't think I do as much as an adult, especially as a non-binary disabled person. I don't see a lot of people like me in the media. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree, right? As a non-binary person myself, and as a disabled person, it's difficult to even find people in media that use canes, much less more than that. And then I'm also seeing from Anna, when it comes to identity, what is visible appears to be represented on screen, but given my demisexuality and demi-romanticism, a lot of media really doesn't represent them, nor does it now, because of the heavy focus on sexual relationships and romantic plot lines. Yeah, so also not seeing a lot of aro, ace, or demi representation in media is pretty common. There's always a love story, even when that love story is pretty cringy, right? And then from Melissa, I did not see folks like me in media, but I'm starting to, and then 100% no, and no again. Yeah. We're getting some ideas that like we are not getting good representation. We don't get chances to see people like us, whether that's people like us, because this. Yeah, and then from Cami, yes, even love stories for kids movies. Ugh, yeah. I love children's media, I really do. And there is always romance. And sometimes it's really weird. So I'm like, I don't think I should necessarily be rooting for the love story between these 8-year-olds. Yeah, and it's always heteronormative in the kids' stories. Yeah, it's not great. It's pretty cringy when you stop and think about it for too long. At least for me, it's pretty cringy. As an adult, I'll watch a lot of, especially like the Disney movies from my childhood, and just be like, "Ooh, I don't love this. I don't love that part." But yeah, and I think something that that we know to be true, right, from looking at our own experiences, right? Representation matters, right? It's something that we feel is missing or that disappoints us. Does that seem fair? I know I'm speaking for a group, which I try not to do. Oh, okay. Another one from Allison. These are interesting questions. Number one, I didn't see myself in media as a child, but I also didn't have an understanding of myself until later in my 20s and 30s. My identity is still evolving. When I do see someone I can relate to, it's exciting and validating. Yeah, absolutely it is. And then nope and nope. Yes, of course. Yeah, certainly I had no idea what I would identify as probably until my 20s. As somebody turning 29 very soon, it's kind of sad that it's been less than 10 years that I've had good words to describe myself. And certainly I don't really have a lot of representation, but when anything even gets close, it's really exciting, right? It's like, oh my God, somebody sees me. There's other people like me. And then, yeah, we're not really noticing like patterns in like who we're emulating necessarily that match these parts of our identities. So there's a lot of studies on this, and you are welcome to look them up. I am not going to go into them because I don't really feel like this is something that needs academic validation. I think that this is something that we can also just look into ourselves and know is true, which is that when we are able to recognize that someone like us in some way has done something, that empowers us to be able to do the same thing. And a lot of us, unfortunately, don't get that type of empowerment. A lot of us feel like we are working towards things on our own, right? I had to build my teaching strategy by myself because there wasn't anyone that I could talk to about it. There wasn't anybody that had similar experiences to me. So I went to books, and I was lucky to find like a couple of people that had died long ago that helped me determine my own kind of strategy, right? And that was lucky. That is not super common, right? Being able to find even literature from people like yourself can be really, really hard. And being able to find people in real life that you can emulate or turn to for guidance can be almost impossible. We model ourselves after the people that have come before, whether we intend to or not, right? And whether we intend to or not, we become people that others can model themselves after. When my students see me teaching in academia and know that I went to graduate schools, sometimes that opens possibilities for them. I'm Latina, and I have helped other Latina students feel capable of grad school, right? I am LGBTQ plus, and I've helped other LGBTQ plus students feel like they can become teachers. I am disabled, and I've helped disabled students feel like they can advocate for themselves with other instructors. I'm an awkward cat person and have helped other awkward students feel like they can make friends. Most of the time, this isn't because I've actively done anything for these students, though obviously I often do, but because I've been honest and open about my own experiences as a Latina, LGBTQ plus, disabled, awkward cat person, all of which I am and more, right? So I'm going to kind of move on from representation, which is sort of the first piece of why we think that this is important, and talk about the second piece of why this is important, which is another time to reflect on some questions and type in some answers, hop off mute. Oops, sorry. So these questions are, was I taught to automatically view people in positions of power, whether that be bosses, teachers, politicians, etc., as credible? Do I think people that look professional are more trustworthy, and what looks professional? Do I trust academic studies more than personal accounts? Same deal as the last one. I want to note here, of course, that these are incredibly uncomfortable questions to grapple with, right? And it's okay if the answers that you come to aren't the ones that you want, or if they surprise you. So Cami threw in chat here, I was absolutely taught to respect and automatically trust and believe folks in positions of power, which is something I still grapple with at times. And I love me some good statistics, I do too, but try to balance that with people's and my own personal experiences. Yeah, finding that good blend. Absolutely. Okay, also seeing in chat from Danny, I was definitely taught that people of authority are trustworthy, but as I have grown into an adult and discovered more of who I am, I've been shown time and time again that just because someone is an authority doesn't mean they know everything. Yeah. I don't automatically assume people dressed in professional attire are more trustworthy. I've learned that often people that dress in business attire aren't always the kindest or most worthy of trust. Yeah, so maybe coming from some personal experiences there. And then no, which is excellent. And then also from Melissa, yes, without questions, they were in that place for a reason and are to be believed and respected. Yes, and that is something I am working to dismantle based on what I was taught was professional. What does that look like? Suit, tie, heels, styled hair, subdued colors, no piercings or tattoos. Yes, something that has been drilled into me as a scientist. I need more than a N of 1 and more degrees of freedom, replicated work, citations, journal articles with high impact factors. Yeah, absolutely. This isn't part of my bio, but I think that this is relevant when I'm asking these questions. My first college degree was not in writing, which is what I now teach. It was not in any liberal arts, it was in physics. So this was heavy drilled into me as a person. And obviously having the identities I have in physics went super well, which is probably why I'm not in it anymore. I'll let people fill in the blanks as they want, but it's a pretty obvious blank. I'm seeing some laughter and some nods. Yeah. But yes, absolutely. Yes. And then, well, so yeah, I work in ag. Yep. Those good cis white straight men dominated fields. They can be tough, right? So these questions obviously don't have nuance baked into them. That is on purpose. And I am not telling people to stop trusting research or ignoring field experts. Absolutely do listen to people doing studies, look at research, read stuff. But oftentimes what I've noticed is that we don't question them very thoughtfully. We assume that these research and these statistics come without bias and come without human error, which they don't. This is a thing that we know. There's all types of bias that can be reproduced in research studies, and we need to be thoughtful about ways those are happening. With my work with Bridgercare on healthcare allies, one of the things that we talk about is how medical research for LGBTQ plus individuals either doesn't really exist because it's not getting funded or people interested in research aren't interested in doing it. or that those studies aren't really working very well because they are limiting how people can identify themselves, and so are missing huge portions of the LGBTQ plus people. Because of the way that the questions are worded, those studies don't end up necessarily being all that correct. And so we don't have a lot of clear answers for things like why people in the LGBTQ plus community face pretty severe healthcare disparities, which is sad, right? And for BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, disabled, and other marginalized peoples, we don't often view them as being credible because of how they look, how many sources they cite, and or how impressive their resume is. Obviously, appearance has nothing to do with knowledge. I'm going to put that on the table. It doesn't matter. And we often discount the real lived experiences of those around us because they don't have access to resources like impressive educations or jobs, which can be incredibly hard to get when you identify as a member of a marginalized community, right? For those of y'all here that identify as part of a marginalized community, I am positive that you have probably hundreds of stories of difficulties that you faced because of your identity in that field. I've talked to tons of students and tons of friends, and this is a thing that is true. It makes it harder. We also know this via research, but again, it's not maybe the best research. So what I'm going to kind of talk about here, right? Okay, I'm seeing another chat from Allison. Yes, probably, but I've always felt this wasn't the case. I can't tackle this question without defining professional and trustworthy, which I think depends on the role. And within each role, there's a ton of variation, which is awesome and a-okay. Yeah, it's a difficult question. Depends on the studies and methods, and personal counts are 100% valid and can speak to both small scale and scalable data. Larger, well-done studies give us opportunities to see if what we see at a small scale does exist at a larger scale. Yeah, absolutely, right? And there are excellent studies, but we need to be thoughtful about which ones we are using. And whether or not those good studies exist for our topic. So I am going to kind of move forward a little bit into, since we've sort of covered why, right, which is that we have these power dynamics and these representation problems that don't necessarily help us or people that we care about. So we're going to talk about how we do this, right? How do we do radical vulnerability? How is this even a possibility for us? And I've kind of broken that into 3 different categories that are pretty rough. They're written, visual, and verbal. So we're going to start with written, and I'm going to go pretty fast. There's a lot of resources on the Document Sharing Hub. There's a folder called Teaching Queer that you can absolutely access. I'll drop more fun things into it as I, find stuff or as I get questions from y'all. So you can absolutely use that. So written, I actually think is probably the easiest one. The first step, which I imagine many people here have already done, but if you have not, please do this, is to put your pronouns in your email signature. This is quick and easy, and especially in professional settings, it A, protects me from having the wrong pronouns used, and B, helps indicate to people getting emails from my professional email that I am somebody that cares about pronouns, which can say a lot to someone like a student or a coworker that might feel alone or scared of sharing that kind of information with me. So this is my real email signature from my real work email. Please don't use the information irresponsibly. Be nice to me, but you are welcome to copy it and have it. I will talk to anybody at any time. This is just one example of what that can look like. Obviously, mine's formatted slightly different in my email. It's a different font, but it's about the same. I would also kind of emphasize your personal, any trainings or volunteer work, anything like that, that has to do with marginalized communities, throwing that on your resume or CV. These are sidebars from my resume and CV. You can see that they are green, right? Are things that indicate to me places where the human beings looking at my CV are comfortable with the fact that I've done this work, which is important to me for my own well-being, right? But also helps indicate to the place hiring me that this is a thing that I'm going to continue to care about and want to do, right? That this is something that is a part of my professional life as well as my personal life. And making that really, really clear is really important. Making statements also about why these communities matter to you is also really cool. I will show you, right? And I'm showing you a resume, a CV, and a syllabus because those are the documents that generally people see about me first. Whatever your documents are, right? Whether that's a web page, a resume, a CV, a syllabus, whatever, a name tag, you can do these sorts of things, right? This is an example of the syllabus, and you'll notice that it's a lot more language because syllabi are allowed to do that. I have a page of diversity policies, which we're not going to read, but on the very first page, I have this statement about name and pronouns. And I also have a note of the non-academic instructor training that I think is relevant to my students, and that includes marginalized identities, which you can kind of see here, right? And this creates this sort of norm where nobody's shocked or surprised by this in my situations, but also where people can see. And if you want copies of this, all of this is available in plain text on that document sharing hub, where it's probably a lot easier to read as well. So just to note there. This might also include things like name tags. Right, here's my name tag for Bridgercare. You can see it in the video. You can see that it has rainbows and my pronouns, right? And I know that in the training that we run for healthcare allies, we give people little rainbow stickers to put on their name tags that are small and pretty durable. Sorry, I'm putting my name tag back on, right? So you can kind of see these sorts of things in the written documentation surrounding your work or your environment, right? I would say that written, I've adapted to be mostly geared towards workplaces. This is because I think that this is where written work probably happens the most and is viewed as being the most important. That does not mean, obviously, that it is the only way. Do we have any questions about this kind of category? We want more examples, looking at stuff, questions about what I've shown us.
Sonia, I have a question because I know you're speaking as an individual. When a
Mhm.
person's working for like a larger organization, what are your recommendations for having something like these on the website, or things like that to talk about trainings that the staff have done or things like that? And I'm asking you specifically because I know you've done like safe zone trainings too, where it's
Yeah.
like recommended that it not be always department wide, but if it is something that the organization
Mhm. So
striving for
most
as a whole,
organizations have an area where on their webpage, right, where they have individual bios for individual people working. So it might be appropriate to put trainings there. If you have done, if your organization is like really cool, way cooler than a lot of the ones I'm involved in. I know Bridgercare is a lot cooler. So this is coming from a note knowing where you work too. That, yeah, I think that making this very clear, right, on that landing page of that workplace, right, making it clear that this is a thing that everyone that works there has to do, I think is kind of key to changing these larger, community norms, right? So I think that, yes, if you can ensure that every single person in your organization is caring about these things and has the knowledge to handle them, absolutely put that up. We only emphasize that that doesn't happen when there is a danger of people misreading that and getting into an unsafe situation. And if you are sure that that's not going to happen, definitely make it organization wide, right? Make it part of the culture. Okay. I'm going to move on, but I will still absolutely be able to answer questions. And this piece, right? It's okay if you don't know the answers yet. It is okay if you continue to think about this, well into the future. You don't need to have answers now, but how might this look for you, right? What might the writing part look like for you? And what barriers might prevent you from doing this? And what questions can I answer for you now? And I can chat about barriers too. I've butted a lot of heads with a lot of people. I am unfortunately a little bit stubborn. My partner has nicknamed me the pretty cannon because they're my partner. So at least they think I'm pretty, but I have a tendency to kind of blast into walls over and over again until they do what I want, which is usually not exist. It's a very accurate, if not entirely flattering description of my personality. I think it's flattering. Most people don't think it's flattering. All right, we can reflect and think, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to look at other things as well.
Sonja, we lost your audio.
Cool. Can we hear me now? Excellent. Thank you. My microphone is being testy. So the visual stuff. Please tell me if I'm lost again. So how we visually mark that we are open to talking about identity experiences is usually what we are most familiar with seeing, right? Flags, decals, posters, clothing, accessories, pins, name tags, buttons, right? There are a lot, some of which are, more suited for certain spaces than others. I will show some examples. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of show a picture here. I'm actually wearing all of the things in this picture too, so you can see them in action, so to speak. But the visual stuff, and what I would recommend is try to buy from marginalized independent creators from the communities that you are trying to represent, right? And emphasize your own identities or focus on your pronouns and the progress flag. I think those are really good rules of thumb, right? The progress flag is meant to be inclusive and, demonstrate allyship with a number of groups as well as belonging potentially. And then pronouns are just useful for all people to have. These are some of my personal favorites you can see on there. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I will share a link to that. I don't remember exactly where it is because it's actually from a friend. Or maybe I bought it for a friend. It's from an Etsy shop that's a queer artist. So I will definitely add that into the document hub. There's a link with, there's a document called Useful Links where I will post more merch stuff as we move forward. I just didn't know what people would like. So I posted some that I enjoy. Yes, yeah. The disability rainbow heart's really pretty. I'll go ahead and stop sharing just for a second so we can see them on my person. It's here, so it's pretty big. And then we also have that they them pin here, the big earrings, and then the little flags over here. And then I already talked about my name tag. The other two that I'm wearing are just kind of this more plain rainbow, which is a little bit more subtle. And then this is actually a quote by Audre Lorde. So getting some sense of some of our possibilities. But yes, yeah, I love pins. I collect them. I collect them in this room. It's a big problem. Yes, yeah. And yeah, getting pins from Etsy is probably my favorite place to do it because then I can be supporting independent artists. I know that Etsy as a platform is not always the best, but it's pretty difficult to support, independent artists without it, especially living in Montana, right? And then I'll also touch on things like decals that you might get from trainings that look like this. They're really exciting, as well as, flags, posters, things like that, right? And I know I'm going so fast. I'm so sorry. Please drop questions. Please bug me. Stop me at any point. This part obviously is going to look different for everybody, right? But making these, sort of movements towards having your professional, air quotes, heavy air quotes, wardrobe include things that are both amplifying and affirming your own identities, but also, amplifying and affirming identities of people that you care about, right? So with this progress flag, right, trans, LGBTQ plus, and BIPOC people specifically, I have a lot of other what I call activism pins that are for different causes as well. I'm gesturing at this board because that's where all of the like 300 pins are. It's really bad. Gonna full expose myself there, but yeah, and you can also get good clothing, good posters, stuff like that from these places that are appropriate for like hanging in an office, or putting like stickers on your work computer if that's allowed or whatnot, right? Water bottle stickers I know are a big thing, right? Use these visual markers, especially in contexts where you are talking with coworkers and going to staff meetings and going to, meetings with like your boss, for example, because even though this is absolutely a risk and is uncomfortable, it helps make it prevalent in your entire organization, right? It is much more likely to help create this kind of lasting change if you are engaging with it in these systems of power, right? Like, it's one thing for me to go to, a classroom wearing all my rainbow stuff, right? When I'm the person in power in the room. It is a whole different thing to go to like a Board of Regents meeting and wear all of it, right? But it's important. Making sure that I am a visible marker of like, hey, somebody that identifies this way is in this room listening to what you're saying, makes it more likely that those people will not say or pass anything that is harmful for those communities. Makes people uncomfortable to have to look at the people that they're harming. It's also incredibly scary to do. I want to leave a lot of space for that. It's really scary. But getting to a place of comfort where you can do that, I think, is really important. Yeah. Yes, I've been to most of the Board of Regents meetings and they do not like me very much. But that's okay. They don't need to. I am also very lucky because I have a boss that is either afraid of firing me or likes me. I'm not sure which. It seems to seesaw a little bit, but it's certainly very helpful. But yes, yeah, the Board of Regents usually don't actively harm people because they don't like talking to people. Just going freaks them out. Because usually there's like one person in that room that isn't on the board. So be that one person, really gear towards making that human uncomfortable. It works. It's really nice. It's also really empowering in kind of this bizarre way. But yes, right. I recommend buying from marginalized artists, so then you can make sure that you are supporting that community with what you're buying. There's huge problems with like pink consumerism, right? Which is where big companies will release like rainbow stuff and not support people that are LGBTQ plus in the end. So a good way to avoid that is to just be like, who's making this? Oh, cool. I can look at their Instagram and they're this awesome queer person of color. That's great. And then if you are not comfortable sharing your identities, you can absolutely use things just like the progress flag, right? You can just say you're an ally. That is always okay. You're never forced to share your own identity, but it does help. I think that it can be really, I don't know, it did a lot for my personal self-confidence to just be like, yes, this is who I am. Look at all of these shiny earrings that I own. Lots of pronoun earrings, right? Okay. So I'm not going to pause for questions for this one. It's kind of the same deal, right? Sitting, reflecting, thinking about what you can be working on and what that might look like. what I'm going to talk about next is the verbal stuff. So the verbal stuff is kind of nice because it is actually something that a lot of the other sessions in this summit have talked about. Things like bystander intervention and active listening, as well as like knowing and sharing accessible resources and being open to these kinds of conversations. I know that these are topics that have been hit on multiple other sessions during the summit. And I know that these are topics that are hit on in a lot of trainings and a lot of resources online. I'm happy to share those with you. But I want us to have enough time for questions at the end, so I am kind of rushing. I knew that I would be doing this. I'm happy to answer questions at any point, but I'm going to assume that we at least know how to Google these questions and that you can. All right. The next kind of piece that I'm going to talk about are these more verbal strategies that I would say are unique and more specifically geared. The first one is this kind of strategy that I call hopes and fears. I stole it from Sustained Dialogue, which is a really cool organization that I've linked in that useful links document. And this is where you basically going into anything, whether it's a staff meeting, a class, training, whatever, where you share hopes that you have for your time together and fears that you have about your time together. This is a really cool tool because you are opening up with vulnerability that everybody's sharing and you have to share too. Everyone does. And you're sharing anonymously. And then you read aloud all of the hopes and fears, right? And you grapple with them together. So you can get, really cool hopes, like I really hope that we manage to make like our curriculum so much more inclusive and diverse. And you can get some really interesting fears too, like I'm afraid that I'm not allowed to teach like white dude literature anymore. Right? And that's just one example. But it creates this space where we can talk honestly about the barriers that we are having and the personal struggles that we're having, as well as make space for like making progress or making change. And it is one of my favorite kind of openings to meetings and to trainings and to especially academic spaces. Like getting people to share about themselves in academic spaces is so uncommon and so immediately powerful. But this also works if you're curious in context of like, my partner has used this strategy at Taco Bell manager meetings. You wouldn't think that that would be a useful place for this, but it actually really helps, right? It helps make their group feel closer together and better. In case you missed the context, my partner works as a manager at a Taco Bell. Please be nice to fast food employees. It's my quick plug. Be a nice human. Don't be weird. So the next piece that I kind of will talk about is including diverse media, right? So trying to make sure that when you are sharing media, that you are sharing multiple different perspectives. And this is really difficult in certain fields, right? But also being honest about how difficult that is. I have a specific statement that you can look at on the resources hub that is all of my syllabus language. And I have this question answered in my syllabus, which is why aren't there more marginalized people readings that we read? And there is a really honest answer in there of like, hey, I can share what I have access to. This is the history of the field, and it's been, white, male, straight, cis dominated for millennia. Rhetoric is not a field where there's a lot of diverse people, unfortunately, and that I'm doing my best, but I'm open to suggestions, right? And this opens me up to being able to talk with students honestly about limitations that I'm having, right? And talking to coworkers honestly about limitations that we as a group are having. The last kind of more specific piece that I'm going to be talking about are silent discussions. So silent discussions were created by multicultural studies professors. There's a lot to them. Everybody kind of does them differently. I did a write-up of how they work in my classroom specifically, but what they are any time that you are engaging with something controversial or difficult with a group of people, having an opportunity to anonymously talk about it to each other and get those initial emotional reactions out is really helpful. So what that does is it touches on that earlier work of representation a little bit, because when we are sharing more diverse media, sometimes people will react to that badly, right? And the silent discussion is a really good way to kind of work through some of those feelings that people are having to read, pieces by Audre Lorde, who's an incredibly difficult person for people to grapple with, but it's a thing that I do. We just go right into the deep end, right? And we read Gloria Anzaldúa, who's, half of her writing's not even in English. So we have to grapple with that, right? And so students are dealing with these feelings and these initial reactions in very specific ways. And the silent discussion is a way for them to get those feelings out and for me to address any misconceptions or misunderstandings that are happening, right? Because a lot of the time I'll get comments in that like, oh, Anzaldúa, or you, me, myself, are an angry Latina, which is not really the correct terminology for me, but also is a stereotype, right? And addressing that and looking at that very openly and honestly is something that I get access to when people are telling me it. When I don't know that they're thinking that, I don't have the opportunity to address it. So obviously, right, how you include more voices will depend on the context that you share, that you are in, right? I teach writing, so I have very specific things that I get to share and have access to. When I am working in the healthcare field, I have a very different sort of set of media that I'm sharing and working with, right? When I am talking to activist groups, there is a different set of media that I'm pulling from. So this is context dependent. I'm happy to help find stuff. I found some cool lists of like general literature for a variety of marginalized groups. You'll notice that some of those lists are more robust than others, but those are not entirely made by me. I am going to stop sharing just so that I can kind of talk about this. Yes, and sorry for people moving, leaving away. I understand that I am running right to the end here, which is entirely in my personality. The last piece that I want to affirm is that I could not have become the person that I have. I could not have gotten where I have gotten without having some role models, right? Some people that I emulate, some representation, even if I didn't realize that that's what that was. You saw those pictures of the professors at the Lavender Cord celebrations and the pictures of the professors at my thesis defense, as well as heard about some of the people that I've not met personally, but that have become people that I emulate, like Anzaldúa and Lorde, who I talk about a lot because I think they're just really cool humans, as well as Bell Hooks, Alice Walker, Roxane Gay, some of whom are still alive, which is great. And, Alison Bechdel, there's a ton. This looking at who has influenced you in your life and how they did that, the answer I come to is that they shared with me their stories. And that empowered me to feel very, very comfortable to share my stories with others. And thinking towards how those people did that really empowered me in my area to do that same thing. So I think that this is a really cool opportunity for reflection on who's inspired you, right? Who allowed you to get where you did. Because some of those answers might be pretty surprising. I was certainly pretty surprised when I was thinking about it. But becoming somebody that someone like me wants to emulate is probably the best compliment I can ever receive. And on that kind of hopeful note, I am happy to chat with people as long as you want. I don't have anything until like 2 p.m. I have to go to a de-escalation meeting for a protest surrounding police brutality tomorrow, and I have conflict de-escalation expertise. So that is as long as I can be here. There's a lot of other stuff. So if you would like to stay, you're welcome to. I've also dropped my email in the chat, which you are absolutely welcome to use as you wish, right? Even if you just email me like, hey, you seem chill and I'd like to be friends. The answer is yes. I'm very bad at making friends and I'm an awkward human. It's not in my nature. I like sitting indoors and talking about things no one cares about. um, like how cool sunken ships are. It's not related, but true. But yeah, on that note, I will turn it over to y'all to use me as you wish. Yeah. Thanks, Cami. Yes. You're welcome. I hope you're having a good day. I thought I saw your daughter earlier on. So hope that that's going well. Yeah, thank you for being here. Yeah, see you soon, Cami.
Hi, just popping in to say thank you with my voice instead of chat. Thank you for being vulnerable. I think that's incredibly powerful when working with people. I say people because often, so I work with youth usually, but now in my new job, I work with adults a ton. But so often we want to think of adults having very distinct needs from youth and vice versa. But I think we're quite more similar than we are different when we break it down to our development and what we need from, especially from people who are hosting a space. Like you said, you know, when you go into a classroom, there's a power dynamic and you've got some of that power. So I think vulnerability is a very incredible way to help others feel more comfortable being themselves. So thank you for your self-deprecating jokes. Not that you seem to be self-deprecating, but
I'm a millennial.
yeah.
Territory.
All right. Well, I appreciated it. Happy Saturday.
Yeah, to you as well. And feel free to reach out in the future if you ever like. I'm happy to help. There are a lot of really cool youth geared versions of this too. What I do is definitely geared towards adults because of who I am. But certainly I'm happy to help if you ever want anything or just to chat through what you're thinking of doing. But yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Thank you so much.